News from across the Federation, spanning the region and covering the globe. This is the KyssFM SKN News Now Evening Edition, your one true source for news. And now your presenter.
Good evening, I'm Ebony Brandon. Today is Wednesday. It is the 8th day of March 2017. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. These are our headlines. Nationally, Honorable Marcella Liebert recognizes the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party's role in empowering women across the Federation on International Women's Day. Regionally, the Trinidad and Tobago government is to construct domestic violence shelters, and internationally, President Donald Trump warns Republicans that the 2018 midterm election could be a bloodbath if new healthcare legislation is not passed. We've got the details of these stories and more straight ahead in this evening's edition of SKN News Now. The St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party chairperson, Honorable Marcella Liebert, has highlighted some of the milestones achieved by her organisation in the pursuit of equality for women in St. Kitts and Nevis. In recognition of International Women's Day, which is being marked around the world today, Ms. Liebert expressed solidarity with women everywhere. She said, while much has been achieved, there is still much more to be done.
Today, as you know, is International Women's Day. And so we join with women all over the world in celebrating our achievements over the years, while recognizing that we still have much work to do in our efforts to empower women. Women all over the world, as you can see, they're marching, they're rallying, standing up for their rights. Today in some parts of the U.S., I think there's a strike. Women saying, a No Woman Day, taking some time off to bring awareness to what they would want to see improved in the lives of women. And of course, we are all in our march towards equality for women and girls. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Women in the Changing World of Work, Planet 50/50 by 2030. And the campaign theme is #BeBoldForChange. The international community has set the year 2030 as the year for countries to implement certain goals towards equality for women. This year, as you see from the theme, there's focus on the world of work. And of course, one of the targets, one of the goals is to guarantee that every woman enjoys her right to decent work.
Liebert also highlighted the Labour Party's role as the first political party in the Federation to open up secondary education universally and welcomed women into the professional world.
The St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party has always fought for the empowerment of women. Just to do a little bit of history, Isa Bradley, I don't know if you've heard that name before, but she was a school teacher. She became a member of the board of directors of the Workers' League and spoke on the Workers' League platform in 1937 during a campaign. She was a pioneer for women in politics. The Workers' League, as you know, became the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party. She probably would have been part of this campaign of being bold for change. It was Labour who, in the face opposition by those who are today in government, who opened up the nation's high schools to all children in 1966, that we are known as the comprehensive education system. This was largely to the benefit of all our girls from poor homes in St. Kitts and Nevis, who for the first time were exposed to ideas, subjects, possibilities that they never in their wildest dreams they contemplated. So for the first time, they were doing subjects like chemistry and physics. They were being taught those subjects. And so that really was responsible for our first female doctors. I think our first female doctors I could recall was Dr. Thelma Philip Brown. Our first female scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, lawyers, you name it. Free, mandatory, and universal secondary education ushered in by Labour, unheard of in any other part of the Caribbean. People came here to find out how we did this. We seem to take these things for granted. And so 50 years later, there was hardly a recognition of that landmark, outstanding development and revolution in education that shut the doors of poverty for so many of us.
Meanwhile, former Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Earl Asser Martin is questioning the government's inaction regarding the construction of a new prison facility. Today on Issues, Dr. Martin said there was something suspicious about the delay in the new prison's construction, particularly since a comprehensive plan and monies for the project had been left in place under the previous Labour Party administration.
I'm left to wonder if all this talk about building a prison at this moment is because they have already set up their building, their business companies as a means of creaming off. And for some of these construction that is supposed to take place to buy the materials from them. I'm left to wonder if that's what's going to happen. The Labour administration before leaving office would have left a comprehensive plan for the construction of a prison over at Estridge. Comprehensive plan. So all they had to do is maybe to go in and look at it. Monies were left. Drawings were there.
Dr. Martin also accused the Team Unity administration of purposely delaying the construction of the new prison and allowing conditions at Her Majesty's prison to deteriorate despite campaigning on a human rights platform.
These are things I said they were concerned about. But no, they first had to make sure that they entrench themselves, informing our former companies. So when these projects would have started, the possible can purchase from them. And meanwhile, you'll have seen a video circulated about the conditions within the prison. How the living conditions are there. And those were the persons who said they were concerned about all that. They used to talk about all kind of human rights, all manner of things. And 2 years after, they haven't chopped stroke about a prison, where you could see a video circulating about the conditions and everything and what's not and so on. Well, I'm sure they're going to come and talk. They have already started to talk about it. Because my understanding in the Prime Minister's New Year's message, I think he mentioned something of that nature. But after 2 years, they look after themselves for 2 years, do all they can do, farm companies, do all manner of things, and then they must come and look after the people after 2 years when they don't entrench themselves.
Dr. Martin's observations follow a recently circulated video in which a prisoner recorded the cramped and squalid living conditions at the prison. Several prisoners were quartered in a crowded cell, and uncovered toilet facilities were also featured in the video. The trial of the 6-year-old murder of George Livingston Quealy has finally come to an end. The three men accused of his murder, Keith Zion Murray, 29, Nicholas Riley, 26, and Denroy Barber Simmons, 30, were all found guilty by a jury on Tuesday. Murray, Riley, and Simmons, all of Challengers, were charged in November 2013, nearly 3 years after the victim, Mr. Quealy, a former Middle Island resident, went missing in Challengers Mountain. In the often dramatic trial, which began last week, the prosecution's star witness, who was reportedly present and admitted to participating in the events following Quealy's murder, testified that a dispute began between the accused men and the victim after Quealy was warned by his killers not to cultivate an illegal substance in a particular location. The row escalated and ended with Quealy being shot and buried in the hills above Challengers Village. Years later, the witness, unable to cope with what he had done, eventually unburdened himself to police, who were then led to the location of the killing. Human remains were found, however, Mr. Quealy's head was not attached to the body. In closing remarks on Tuesday, Queen's Counsel, or that should be Monday, Queen's Counsel Dr. Henry Brown, who represented Murray, argued that forensic evidence tying the accused to the killing was absent, and also said that the prosecution had not proven definitively that the body belonged to Quealy. Dr. Brown also questioned the credibility of the star witness, whom he described as a confessed murderer. Having returned their verdict after a 4-hour deliberation on Tuesday, trial judge Justice Trevor Ward QC ordered a social inquiry report which will guide sentencing, which was set for May. The other accused, Riley, was represented by Hesketh Benjamin and Simmons by Jason Hamilton. The prosecution was led by Director of Public Prosecutions Valston Graham. Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Didicus Jules, says though the state of regional integration is strong, it's not time to relax efforts. Addressing the OECS Authority meeting in St. Kitts, Dr. Jules explained that vigilance is increasingly critical as the Caribbean is constantly bombarded from all angles by a host of issues.
Yes, I think the state of regional integration is strong and good, but I've often used the analogy of a race, a marathon. Sometimes it is not how fast you are running, even if you feel you're running at top speed, but how fast the rest of the field is running. And so it is with the rest of the world. We live in a very fast-paced world where issues are coming from left field and center at all angles, and so we need to be able to respond with that speed to those issues. And that's why the head spent so much time in today's meeting focusing on the Commission as a mechanism of responsiveness to those issues and as a source of empirical policy, empirical fact-based advice to the authority, so that the heads will receive the best information and intelligence available to make decisions on critical issues as they emerge.
Dr. Jules also elaborated upon a number of accomplishments under the umbrella of regional integration, including the free movement of people. He underscored, however, that there are kinks to be ironed out in order to enable, among other things, the seamless transfer of persons' information from one member state to another for employment purposes.
With respect to regional integration in specific terms, I think it's known to everyone now that the OECS has made significant strides on the freedom of movement of people. You just simply need a government ID, government-issued ID to travel across. There's no requirement of work permits or skill certificates or any such thing to live, work, and play in any of the OECS territories. However, there's attendant things that need to be addressed. The question of social security. If you relocate, for example, to Antigua or St. Lucia as a Kittitian, what then? How do we ensure that your social security benefits are carried over, and that you can? It's like moving from one village in St. Kitts to another village in St. Kitts, or relocating to Nevis. There should be that seamlessness in how we do things, and that there's a lot of painstaking work, technical work that needs to be done in order to dismantle some of the barriers for ease of movement and circulation. And these have to be done. What makes it complex in this current period are the security concerns in today's world. So whatever changes are made have to be made that would allow the freedom of movement of citizens and the free circulation of goods and so on, but have adequate and even invisible safeguards for security, the security of people and the security of goods. So that, for example, when we talk of the free circulation of goods, it should really, we have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that that free circulation of goods is of legitimate goods, and that, stuff that is illegal does not get freely transported in the process.
Finally, this evening, there is a tug of war for leadership within the Concerned Citizens Movement on Nevis. This is according to prominent Nevision, Dr. Kelvin Daly. Dr. Daly claimed recently that the deputy leader of the CCM, Honorable Mark Brantley, while vying for leadership of the CCM, is being heavily resisted both within and without the party.
There's a serious leadership battle going on in CCM, where there are two competing factions, and the observer has chosen its side. The observer has taken its claim on Minister Jeffords in deference to Mr. Mark Brantley.
So the observer has abandoned Brantley and Amri and has taken
the observer never supported Brantley. Get that clear. The owner, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Brantley have always been at war. Now, the situation with that leadership fight is a real fight, because the heir apparent to the CCM leadership, everybody thought was Mark Brantley. But I understand that the Prime Minister don't want him, and the Premier don't want him.
Oh my God.
So he's really up a gum tree. And Zook don't want him. So he has really been abandoned. Now his claim is this: if I am to finance the party like I did in 2012 and 13, I must be leader. I am not going to be second place behind anybody. I don't need money. I have enough money. What I need is power. But when you have forces aligned against you, in the persons of Zook, who's going to challenge him for leadership, in the person of Vance Amri, who do not want him as leader, and the person of the Prime Minister of the Federation, who doesn't even want to see him in the federal cabinet, he has a tough row to hoe.
As early as mid-2016, there was speculation that the leader of the CCM, Honorable Vance Amri, would pass on the reins of leadership by the end of that year. Until now, the Premier has not said exactly when he will leave the post. However, he has confirmed that his retirement is imminent, and too, that a suitable successor is being identified. Still to come in regional developments this evening, we have more information on the arrest of several top opposition figures in Guyana. Stay tuned. In Guyana, operatives of the Special Organized Crime Unit, SOCU, and prominent opposition People's Progressive Party politicians flexed their muscles yesterday over a request by SOCU to question them regarding issues related to the acquisition of land in an area commonly referred to as Praderville. In the final analysis, SOCU won the first battle, proving that no one is above the law. Travis Chase filed this report.
It all started when SOCU extended a courtesy to the opposition politicians to visit SOCU headquarters for questioning in relation to an ongoing investigation. Perhaps by virtue of their status as parliamentarians and for MPs, they were initially invited in for questioning. Then, former Attorney General Anil Nandlal, who is reportedly providing legal representation for Dr. Roger Luncheon, former Home Affairs Minister Clement Ruhi, former Education Minister Priya Manik Chand, opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo, and others, had expressed reservations about the constitutionality of the move by SOCU to proceed in the manner it was going regarding the Praderville case. Nandlal reportedly advised his clients about his reservations and felt that they had no obligation to comply with the SOCU request. That's when SOCU was provided with the opportunity to flex its own muscles. At the end of it all, 8 prominent personalities, Bharat Jagdeo, former Natural Resources Minister Robert Prasad, former President Donald Ramatar's daughter Lisa Vita Ramatar, former NISL Secretary Marcia Nadir Sharma, former President of the Private Sector Commission Ramesh Duku, former Cabinet Secretary Dr. Roger Luncheon, and 2 others were arrested and questioned over the Praderville 2 land acquisition. They were all released on their own recognizance, but opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo, after his release, spoke of his presidential immunity and described the move by SOCU as politically motivated.
They asked me several questions relating to the Praderville transaction, and I said I made a short statement because they asked me questions about my official, in my official capacity, and I have immunities on those. So I refuse to answer those questions. So we can expect with this the vindictive nature of this government that maybe charges would be laid in the future, and when those are laid, we'll contest them in court.
But it was the same Barra Jagdeo who a few months ago had said that if the authorities were to find anyone in the former PPP administration culpable of serious improprieties, the law should take its course.
Yes, I was arrested. At my office because after you left, the media left, they arrested Dr. Luncheon. Then they came over and said that you're arrested.
On what grounds?
My lawyers who were there asked, and there was a hemming and hawing about the nature of the charges or why I'm being arrested. Nevertheless, we did not resist arrest. I came down here, I said, you're trying, you asking me questions in my private capacity or my official capacity at that time? Because if you're doing that, you're going to breach the veil of immunity that I have for official acts. And that will have far-reaching consequences in this country, because anything that Granger does or any subsequent president in his official capacity to would be challenged and can be challenged.
The first to be arrested was former head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon.
Dr. Luncheon?
What did he ask? What did he ask?
Questions that had a lot more to do than we thought, including the matters related to Pradoville, but also matters related to NISIL, GWI, and GPL, as far as they provided the services in Pradoville too.
Suku is expected to question other Pradoville 2 residents during this week, including the Director of Public Prosecutions, Shalimar Alihak, former Home Affairs Minister Clement Ruhi, and former Public Service Minister Jennifer Westford, among others.
The Trinidad and Tobago government is closely guarding information about domestic violence shelters, which are said to be coming on stream in the not-too-distant future. Acting Leader of Government Business, Clarice Rambarat, delivered the news in Senate on Tuesday.
The government will commission 5 shelters for victims of domestic violence shortly. 3 will be used to house women and 2 for men. The location of these shelters cannot be disclosed because they are considered to be places of safety. Persons wanting to access the shelters must either liaise with the police or through the domestic violence hotline in order to access the services.
The International Labour Organization, ILO, is focusing on a smooth school-to-work transition initiative for the prevention of child labour. This week, officials in St. Lucia reviewed Brazil's successful experience with the program and discussed best practices.
The International Labour Organization, ILO, says the case for accelerated global action targeting child labour and the lack of decent work opportunities for youth is very clear. Officials say paving the way to decent work for young people can help prevent child labour. Rissel Melville is the national coordinator at the ILO's Decent Work Team Office in the Caribbean.
Over the past 20 years, when compared to the rest of the world, Latin America and the Caribbean has been the region where the most progress was achieved in the battle against child labour. However, in the last few years, we have seen a very worrying stagnation in the rate of decrease of child labour. Basically, the regional initiative is a manifestation of the commitment by the Caribbean and Latin American countries to speed up the pace of the elimination of the worst forms of child labour, with our original commitment deadline being 2016, and all of the forms of child labour by 2020.
St. Lucia recently signed on to the Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labour initiative. It's a commitment by member countries to end child labour. Labour Minister Stevenson King says while studies have shown that the practice of using St. Lucia's children for economic activities has decreased since the days of the banana boom, there is no room for complacency. He says this week's seminar gives St. Lucia the opportunity to learn from the Brazil experience.
The fact that the report alludes to the view that schools do not play any meaningful protective role in the lives of many working children, but rather provide opportunities for recruitment into gangs, organized crime, or part-time voluntary prostitution, and where teachers do not appear to be trained in addressing some of the emotional needs of children, in the absence of supportive parents, is a disturbing signal of a society on the brink of social decay.
Brazil's ambassador in St. Lucia, His Excellency Sergio Cury, says the program is based on the premise that many social ills are linked and cannot be treated in isolation. He says this is why the Brazilian model tackles child labor alongside childhood hunger and youth unemployment.
Broad access to education of the infantile population. Children being able to remain at school up to the last curricular year. Educational system doing its part in providing minimal conditions for children's display of an acceptable standard of apprenticeship. That targeted record will not be achieved if children are not properly fed.
The one-day session was held on Monday, March 6, 2017.
Coming up next on SKN News Now, the British government has suffered another defeat on the Brexit bill. We've got the details up next. President Donald Trump has warned House Republicans if they can't pass healthcare legislation after 7 years of promises, it could be a bloodbath in the 2018 midterm election.
We're going to take action.
President Trump convening with top House Republicans, warning them they could face a bloodbath in midterms if they don't repeal and replace Obamacare.
There's going to be no waiting and no more excuses by anybody.
But divisions in the GOP over their replacement bill could derail the proposal, only one day after its release.
This is not the repeal bill that we've been waiting for all these years. This is a huge opportunity that's been missed.
Conservative lawmakers dubbing the American Health Care Act Obamacare Light, some calling for a complete gutting of the plan's refundable tax credits and Obamacare's Medicaid expansion.
The first thing Republicans are bringing forward is a piece of legislation that says we repeal it but keeps Medicaid expansion and actually expands it, that keeps some of the tax increases. That is not what we promised the American people we were going to do.
Senate Republicans finding fault elsewhere. 4 GOP senators will oppose any bill that doesn't protect Medicaid enrollees in their states. The president promising to put his weight behind the replacement, unsurprising since he campaigned on a full repeal.
I think the repeal bill probably won't pass unless we take replacement off of it.
The president tweeting at one of the bill's most vocal conservative opponents, Senator Rand Paul. Mr. Trump writing, "I feel sure that my friend Rand Paul will come along with a new and great health care program." And Republican leadership is rallying around the bill. House Speaker Paul Ryan confident they'll get the votes.
We've got a few weeks. We'll have 218 when this thing comes to the floor. I can guarantee you that.
The British government has suffered another defeat on the Brexit bill after the House of Lords voted to give Parliament the final say on how the UK leaves the European Union. Prime Minister Theresa May argued this would weaken her position in negotiations with Europe. Barnaby Phillips reports.
Consideration on report of the European Union.
The House of Lords was packed. More than 600 members, the great, the good, the wise, the privileged, squeezed into the old chamber. In a sign that the government was in trouble, a former minister from Theresa May's own Conservative Party argued that Parliament should have the power to veto any agreement between Britain and the EU at the end of the divorce negotiations.
We now face the most momentous peacetime decision of our time. And this amendment ensures that Parliament has the critical role in determining the future that we will bequeath to generations of young people, and I urge your lordships to support the amendment.
But other veteran politicians disagreed, arguing that opponents of Brexit were being dishonest as to their true intentions.
This House is absolutely full of people who still haven't come to terms with the results of the referendum, and this is a clever lawyer's confection in order to reverse the results of the referendum.
My Lords, this mischievous new clause, masquerading as an assertion of parliamentary sovereignty, deserves to be rejected out of hand.
But it wasn't, as became clear when the votes were counted.
Contents 366, not contents 200.
A heavy defeat for the government, a blow to Theresa May's authority, but perhaps not much more than that, because the House of Lords has only limited power to disrupt the will of a determined Prime Minister.
When this legislation returns to the lower house, the House of Commons, the government is confident that it has the numbers to overrule any amendments introduced by the Lords. Nonetheless, any defeat is frustrating for Theresa May because it means delay. She would like to invoke Article 50, that is, start the process of Britain leaving the EU as soon as possible.
The peace deal between Colombia's government and FARC rebels is entering its final stages. Roughly 7,000 fighters are gathering at transitional camps in preparation to give up their weapons for good. With the battlefield rules now relaxed, a baby boom is emerging at transitional camps across Colombia. Dozens of babies have been born recently and many more are on the way. Gerald Tan reports.
The cries of war sound a little different these days in Colombia. FARC rebels are laying down their weapons and taking up new responsibilities.
When we were fighting, we were also thinking about having babies. So we thought that when the conflict was over, we could make a home and a family. This is what we want for the future.
Women made up roughly a third of FARC fighters. During the rebellion, the idea of motherhood was unthinkable. Those who did get pregnant either had to leave the baby with relatives or terminate the pregnancy, although FARC has long denied any policy of forced abortions.
At the time, we used to look for every contraceptive method to avoid pregnancies and thus consolidate our movement.
Things have been changing since the rebels signed a peace deal with the government in December. Battlefield rules are now relaxed, and a baby boom is emerging at transitional camps across Colombia. Dozens of babies have been born recently. Many more are on the way.
I think that in some ways, these children born to FARC fathers and mothers symbolize the hope of a country that needs peace and reconciliation.
The FARC rebellion lasted more than half a century. As Latin America's longest-running conflict comes to a close, a new chapter is beginning for many of those involved. Parenthood.
That wraps up our international developments. Now for a recap of our headlines this evening. Nationally, Honorable Marcella Liebert recognizes the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party's role in empowering women across the Federation on International Women's Day. Regionally, the Trinidad and Tobago government is to construct domestic violence shelters. And internationally, President Donald Trump has warned House Republicans that the 2018 midterm election could be a bloodbath if new healthcare legislation is not passed. Stay with us, still to come, Sports Zone. Tonight in Sport Zone, Cricket Australia's CEO James Sutherland says accusations of unfair play against Captain Steve Smith by India are outrageous. Stay with us for the details. Accusations of unfair play by Australia in their test defeat by India are outrageous, says Cricket Australia Chief Executive James Sutherland. Australia skipper Steve Smith was seen looking up to his side's dressing room when pondering whether to ask for review after he was given out LBW. India captain Virat Kohli said Smith had crossed the line. The International Cricket Council confirmed no action would be taken against either captain. Smith, 27, admitted his error and described it as a bit of brain fade. The laws of the game forbid players from consulting with anyone off the field about whether to use the decision review system, given that support staff have access to television replays in the dressing room. Kohli, 28, said it was not an isolated incident and alleges he saw Australian players looking to the dressing room for DRS assistance on 2 other occasions while he was batting. The Indian cricket authorities responded with a strong rebuttal, insisting they steadfastly stand with Kohli and his team. India's victory leveled the 4-match series at 1-1, and the penultimate test begins in Ranchi on 16th March. Still in cricket, West Indies' Miguel Cummins may play in his third ODI after being added to the squad for the third and final contest against England. West Indies have added Cummins to their squad for the dead rubber one-day international contest against England as a replacement for the injured Shannon Gabriel. Paceman Gabriel sustained a left side strain during the second ODI in Antigua, which West Indies lost by 4 wickets to slip to a 2-0 deficit in the 3-match series and was restricted to bowling just 3 overs. Cummins, who was named in an initial 15-man squad before that was trimmed to 13, is now in contention to play when West Indies attempt to salvage some pride from the third fixture in Bridgetown on Thursday. The 26-year-old has played in 2 ODIs, the last of which came in November against Zimbabwe. And finally this evening, sport tourism is a fast-growing sector the world over. In Uganda, one of the country's biggest passions, motorsport is helping drive competitors and fans into exploring new areas and attractions.
The thrill of fast cars, dust and the adrenaline rush. Here in Uganda, motorsport is one of the more popular sports. Now it's taking funds to new destinations like Kabale. The region, described as the Switzerland of Africa, has been an unexpected scenic delight for many.
The routes that were taken in this rally event were quite spectacular. They were taken through the hills that really caught my attention. So the 2 days rally, we had to schedule an extra day, personal day outside the daily program to see the sceneries around Kabale, the hills, Lake Bunyonyi down there. You can see how beautiful it is.
It's forest terrain, giving the drivers an exciting experience.
The place itself is very nice. The people were very good. The weather is so nice. I'm telling you, it was something very different. There are a number of people who had never been to Kabale, but now they know Kabale. Same way we go for Potro. So at the end of it all, it's about tourism as we enjoy the game.
The region is slowly opening itself to sports tourism by hosting sports events. Hundreds of enthusiasts have turned up for this sporting event. They have spent several days in this area, and the hoteliers say it has been good for business.
The place has been very full. Many tourists have come to watch this event in Kabale. Therefore, everybody has been very happy.
Promoters of the sports tourism initiative say more areas could benefit.
Stakeholders in tourism industry have realized the potential and they are trying to make sure that they drive the numbers towards where sports activities are taking place. Popular ones like, for example, the motorsports, people really get fascinated about them, and they can really pull large crowds. However, local sports like, I would say, for example, like in Buganda, where we have got these bigger sports, football teams and the rest, people can be attracted to come if there's some effort put in to add in some special attraction.
According to the Uganda Tourism Board, Uganda is projected to earn about $2 billion from tourism per annum in the next few years. Many hope a growing sports tourism sector could see that revenue rise even further.
That wraps up our news package for this evening. Thanks so much for tuning in to tonight's edition of SKN News Now. On behalf of the entire team here at KyssFM, I'm Ebony Brandon, wishing you a very pleasant evening. Stay tuned. DJ Yardi comes up next.